Hello everyone, my name is Tanya Tiro from Special Needs Jungle. Welcome to the Send Review webinar. I hope that everybody can see and hear me. The webinar today is a collaboration of the Department for Education with Special Needs Jungle, the NNPCF, you can see Tina there in the corner, Contact and Family Fund. So today we're delighted that the Children and Families Minister, Will Quince, who has responsibility for SEND, is joining us to answer your questions.
Thanks, Tanya. If you've read the slide, you will see that we're starting with a brief update from the Minister, followed by us asking him some questions that we've had frequently asked or whether they've been submitted. And then we'll hear from the rest of you, and you can chip in on the Q&A button at the bottom of the bar. So if you use your mouse, you can see there's a chat function which is only used for technical issues, and then the Q&A, and we will grab some questions from the Q&A boxes there, and we will ask the Minister as and when they come in.
So feel free also to tweet and share. You can use the hashtag #SendReview. So yeah, tweet and share on Facebook and Twitter and use the hashtag #SendReview. And welcome now to the Minister, Will Quince, who is going to give us his SEND review update to start off with.
Hi, Tanya. Nice to see you, and thank you very much for having me. I apologise in advance. I was away at the end of last week with the army, and I bruised my ribs. So if you hear any sort of noises of pain, it's not I'm finding this session painful. It's because I'm not very good away with my ribs. But it's a real pleasure to be here, and thank you very much for having me. I'm really pleased to be able to join you, and thank you for setting up this session. And I'm really pleased to see that so many of you were able to join the webinar. And I don't want to say too much up front, Tanya, because I want mostly to hear from you. That's what really this session's about, and then also doing my best to answer any questions that you all have about the SEND review. I just start by saying, look, I know that there are many parents. I've spoken to so many that are very, very impatient for change, understandably, to the SEND system. And the last couple of years have been particularly hard. I entirely get that, especially maybe so because of the pandemic. And it's why concluding the SEND review has been a really high priority for me as Minister for Children and Families, and of course the Secretary of State. And since we both came to the department in just a handful of months ago, in middle of September of last year, so it's been really, really important for me to speak with parents, and I try to do as much of that as I do, and I'll continue doing so over the coming sort of weeks and months. For me, personally, I was really keen to get the letter out to parents about the review early. I've met parents and young people on visits, amazing, inspirational visits up down the country. And I can say, in all honesty, that what you have told us has been hugely influential in terms of shaping my and the department's thinking. Now, I know that change is hard. It takes time, it takes commitment, but it is absolutely improved by debate and challenge. And I appreciate the challenge that you rightly give me and us. And where we can't agree, and there will be things on which we can't agree, choices, sometimes difficult ones, have got to be made so we move forward. And I'm not promise, I haven't done from the I won't do now, that the review all of the answers or that everyone will agree with every single one of our proposals. But what I will promise and give you the commitment that we've got to keep talking, working together, and as we take forward changes, that we do so based on what people are telling us, and we do it in as informed way as possible, and importantly, in partnership with them. And that it's absolutely imperative in my view that includes that includes parents. So we're finalising proposals right now ahead of publishing the green paper later this month. That's going to be a significant step. I know a step that many have been waiting far too long for. But I want to be really clear, it is not the end of the process. We have a full public consultation, which will be at least 12 weeks. And I really hope that parents and carers and children and young people and many others who work in SEND will engage with it and will tell us what they really think. I don't doubt that for a minute, but I just wanted to stress that it's really important we hear your views, because your views really matter. They always have. They have to me and they have to the department. Everywhere I've been, every single parent, carer, those involved with the SEND system have always raised accountability. It's absolutely key for the review. It's something that I've been pushing the team on to go much further on, and you can expect to see a lot about strengthening it in the green paper. I completely recognise that too many parents' experience of the system is just, frankly, it's not good enough. I've been told so often how stressful it is to have to push so hard and fight and fight and fight to get the support that parents think that their child's need. And I've been really clear that it's important that we look again at redress mechanisms. And although they've always been there within the system for families who need them, we've got to make sure that they work. But I think what I would just say though is that I think there's a bigger issue to tackle as part of the review. And yes, having robust mechanisms for accountability and holding those to account is really important. At its very heart, we should have a system that is far less confrontational and make sure and offers families the support that they need, early identification and support and intervention delivered promptly in settings that can properly provide it. So yes, we've got to get the accountability and redress mechanisms right, but we've also got to fundamentally redesign the system so it's far less confrontational and parents don't feel the need to fight because they're getting the support that their child needs in the right place at the right time. Does that help, Tanya?
Well, we can certainly hear you, but I'm not sure that people believe that will, making it less confrontational will help with accountability, because we went through this last time when we did the reforms. Yeah.
I think, look, it's a fair challenge, and will it help if I actually talk a little bit about some of my thinking? So what I've been clear, I really want the review to include. So I think first of all, it's greater clarity on people's roles and responsibilities in the system, how we align and oversee accountabilities, that funding is used efficiently. How can we improve mainstream provision? How do we reduce the amount of local variation so we don't have this postcode lottery? How we reduce the number of lengthy, stressful, and sometimes very expensive tribunal appeals, and of course the emotional pressure that comes on families in doing so. So I'm alive to all of those issues, and I've been really clear with the team that the review has got to answer those questions for parents.
Thanks, Minister. It's Tina from the NNPCF. So one of the other frequently asked questions, again, is about money and value. So by 2018, the last reforms had cost over £600 million, but the Local Government Association said there was still £500 million funding gap for SEND. So how will we ensure that these new reforms don't make the same mistakes again, and implementation money isn't wasted? It's disabled children who need value for money, not just LAs. So have you got an answer for that, please?
Yeah, Tina, it's a really good question. And although funding inevitably will play a part in the review, its outcomes and doing the right thing by children with SEND that is very much at the forefront of my mind. I completely agree with you. Fundamentally, value for money is about making sure that funding is used to provide children with SEND the most effective support. And we've looked really hard at the way we implemented the 2014 reforms and what lessons we can learn from that. And the Green Paper will set out our plans to implement the changes we're proposing and the resources we'll have to support that implementation.
Thank you. So this question here it's about mainstream. Parents are saying, why does the government seem to want to force children into mainstream schools, preference for mainstream schools, when schools don't have the money, they often don't have the will, they don't have the training, and they don't have the space for them. Why bother forcing square pegs into round holes when quite often they just end up getting excluded?
Tanya, it's a really fair question, and I absolutely don't want to see that happen. And the government's never had a policy, and it's certainly not my policy, of forcing children with SEND into mainstream schools. The current system is based on the presumption of mainstream provision for most children and young people, and we're not changing that. And I think when I speak to most parents, they generally agree that most children with SEND should be in a mainstream school near their homes, being actively included in their local communities wherever possible. But ultimately, it has to come down to what is the right setting to give the right support for the child at the right time. And I can understand why there's lots of skepticism, because I know that that not enough parents are convinced, with good reason, that their children, particularly those with complex needs, will get the support that they need in mainstream. And too many have been let down by not having a special educational need identified early enough, and then when it is identified, not getting the support they need. The SENCO not having the time, a teacher perhaps not being feeling confident to give the child in the school, in a mainstream setting, the support that they need. And I think that's why, I've always been clear. We've just secured 2.6 billion pounds in the spending review to in effect for capital funding to provide more SEND places. That's going to be a mixture of specialist provision and better investment in mainstream settings, so children with SEND can be better supported in mainstream schools. And it's why I think it's really important that we make those improvements in mainstream schools, and we'll include proposals in the Green Paper for how we're going to make those proposals, because ultimately I want to do the right thing by children and young people with SEND. If that's mainstream, then we've got to make sure that mainstream works for them and supports them. If it's a specialist setting, then that's the right place to be. Then of course that's what we need to do. But it's about the right support for the at the right time, based on a child's needs.
Thank you, Minister. So the next question is about the SEND review. So in what ways will the SEND review improve real inclusion for children and people who are in mainstream education settings, and ultimately in society as adults? More than 15% of children have SEND, but league tables and school inspections don't focus on their needs. So how will they be changed to bring SEND into focus?
Yeah, so there will be a really strong emphasis in the Green Paper on how we propose to build a more inclusive education system. So what do I mean by that? I mean a system in which parents have greater confidence to apply to their local school. So on things like inspections, so Ofsted's education inspection framework has a strong focus on how schools support all pupils to succeed, particularly pupils with SEND and disadvantaged pupils. And to achieve an outstanding judgment, inspectors will look to see that a school has a curriculum that's ambitious and meets the needs of pupils with SEND. And I think we think it's really important that all pupils whatever their background, are included in school performance measures. And the green paper will set out what more we can do to improve incentives for schools to support children and young people with SEND. And we're also going to look very closely about what some of the disincentives are within the system currently, and look to iron those out.
Thanks, Minister, for your answers. And whilst we've been talking and you've been taking these questions and answering them for us, they have been very busy in the Q&A section. And we've had over 99 questions already in a Q&A. So we'll hand over now to Renata and Sarah, who will be going through those Q&As, and we'll be picking out some for you to answer as we go along.
Yeah, hi there. I hope you can hear me okay. The first question I want to start with is about Empower Consulting. We've had lots of questions coming in about them. And so we're wondering if you could tell us more about the DfE's new 1.5 million contract with them. And given the fact that the SEND review hasn't concluded, is there still going to be a consultation period? What has Empower been asked to do at this stage in a way that doesn't preempt the green paper?
Thanks, Renata. So the first thing to say is on the consultation, I've been really clear that we need a minimum of a 12-week consultation, because, well, to be frank, although obviously there is a huge amount of work that's gone into the SEND review, and the green paper will make a number of proposals, I think there are inevitably going to be elements in there which people will have either further questions about, will have comments about, and have things that they either will agree with very strongly, be lukewarm about, or disagree with. And I think that minimum of a 12-week period to go through that at some length is going to be really important. On the provision with Lincolnshire, I mean, fundamentally that was about delivering both better value and also in terms of finances, but also working to improve outcomes. I probably can't say a huge amount more about it at this stage, but I will gladly do so at a later date. But I've seen the press reports as well over the course of the weekend.
Hello, Minister. It's Sarah from the NNPCF. My question is around joint working, and there's lots of questions around health and health services, particularly CAMS, and how it's a broken system, and how not getting diagnosis and mental health support particularly is affecting families, and how is the SEND review going to bring everything together?
It's a really good question, Sarah. And I think one of the this is another thing that comes up time and time again. I mean, it's all well and good having an early identification within schools. We can have more enhanced training at initial teacher training level and Senkos, but ultimately if the local health systems aren't lined up to then offer the support that a child may need, for example, speech and language therapy or some other kind of therapy, we're going to be back into the same position. And I've been working really closely with my counterparts at the Department for Health and Social Care, as has the Secretary of State with the Secretary of State for Health and Social Care, to make sure that we're really joined up. And I think that working together across different agencies is so important to provide support to children and young people. And I've been working really closely with them as part of the SEND review process. We absolutely know that this needs to improve, and the green paper is going to set out some new ways of working that embed collaboration at all stages. And I'll continue to work, will continue to work with the health and care system, so we're aligned with the implementation of the new ICSs, or the integrated care systems, and also alongside that the government response to the independent care review. Having said that, Sarah, look, I'm not going to. I'll be frank with you, as I've tried to be throughout since my appointment. The biggest worry bead I have is us not being able to effectively at a local level link up our ambitions with local health provision. And that's why I'm putting so much emphasis on the work that we're doing with my counterpart at the Department for Health, because this has to be a joint and shared endeavour.
Okay, this question's focusing on the slightly older young people, those that are preparing for adulthood. Reforms recognise that many of our young people need to stay in education for longer, and that's become even more important due to time lost during COVID shielding. And there are currently around 30,000 20 to 25-year-olds with the EHCPs. So the question is whether or not you believe it's right that future 20-year-olds will have to decide between completing their education and eating, given that the Department for Work and Pensions has closed off all access to benefits to cover living costs.
So I think I can certainly pick that question pick that up with my department, my counterparts at the Department for Work and Pensions. I'll probably need a little bit more detail in terms of the changes you suggest have been made in relation to DWP policy, but I'll gladly look into that further and come back to you.
And my question is around training. Is training included within the SEN review, and for SENCOs and teachers across a broad range of disabilities? Basically, does it include deafness as well as autism? And the other part to the question was around training for SEN team officers. Will there be a qualification around producing good outcomes within plans as well?
So I think the green paper will make a lot of this clear. And we've listened, and I think training has come up time and time again, in part because we know that a lot of teachers don't feel confident, and every teacher should be and is a teacher of SEND, but we know we need to do far more around initial teacher training, around ongoing continuing professional development, and around the training for SENCOs. So expect to see us talk a lot about training in the green paper.
The next question is, how can we stop LAs not providing any educational provision during an EHCP appeal? Currently, the LGO won't look at this time period, and local authorities have become very aware of this.
Yeah, well, look, it's not acceptable for any child to be left without a school, or for a disabled child to be left without the right provision. And the local authority that drew up the child's EHCP is responsible for making sure that the educational provision set out in it is delivered. And this includes admission to the named school, and the school is obliged to admit the child if it's named on the plan. And any decision about provision for children with SEND should be made jointly, taking very much a person-centered approach with the views of children, young people and parents taken into account when those decisions are made. It's unacceptable. It shouldn't be happening.
My next question is around SEND children being out of school, and what's being done to support those families, as many are being excluded. There's particular hostility towards families as well, around them receiving fines, and yet the schools aren't fined if they're not allowing their child to attend the school full time.
Do you think, Sarah, you would be able to send me some examples of that? Because I'd like to look into that further, because that shouldn't be happening. I mean, at the moment there is a lot of discretion when it comes to the head teacher, but if guidance isn't being followed, then I'd want to have a look at that. So if you can send some examples, I'll gladly follow up on those.
So one of the things that families are feeling quite got at is that when attendance from school refusal is getting low, they're being threatened with being fined, and yet they don't feel that they're getting support. Is that sort of side of it going to be covered within the SEND review?
So I will certainly look into that further. I mean, ultimately, there will still be discretion for head teachers, but schools should be taking an inclusive approach. That's the sort of thing that I wouldn't want to see. I don't believe there are many parents out there that are deliberately keeping their children off school and any head teacher should recognise some of the challenges that the children within their on their register may face. And I would suggest a fine isn't the answer. Identifying what additional support needs may be required is the answer.
Just to pick up on what you were saying before about decisions needing to be made with the families, have you given any consideration to having lay members on panels for SEND within local authorities? In that way, decisions could then be made sort of like not just looking at resources, but also looking holistically at child's needs.
So I haven't, Renata, given much thought to that. I don't, as far as I'm aware, that's not a proposal that's been put to me so far. But look, please feed it in. Feed it in as part of the review. I'll certainly take it away now and explore it further myself. You know, I'm open to ideas. So especially for those with considerable experience in the system. So do keep firing them over.
We also have a question around post 16 to 25 and how it still feels a huge cliff edge for many, many families, and how will preparing for adulthood become, how will the system improve for those families?
So I think, look, you have to wait for the, I'm tempted to sort of go into a bit more detail, but I think I'll give you a teaser. So I mean, certainly in terms of we're expanding the supported internship scheme, but in my view, I really want us to go a lot further. And you know, I was up in a college in Cumbria just a handful of weeks ago, meeting with a number of young people and their parents, some of whom are just turning 16, some have just over 18 and have just been through the system. And they gave me lots of food for thought in this area. So all I would say is I'm really ambitious about what more we can do in this space. And it doesn't all sit within the Department for Education. I think we need to do a lot more with our colleagues at the Department for Work and Pensions, but also other government departments and local government too, to make sure that we're giving far more opportunities, not just for work experience, but for internships and paid roles within local authorities and government agencies too.
Moving to early years now, is there anything in the pipeline to improve SEND services for the younger children? For example, access to funding before 3 or 4 years old?
So I mean, again, I'm tempted to sort of head into the green paper a bit, but obviously the earlier that we identify a support need, the better. And I'm certainly keen to explore what more we can do in early years settings around again the training side of it. So ensuring that early years educators are very much alive to some of the issues, and also what support is available, and working alongside the NHS and others around diagnosis. So I suppose what you're tempting me to go further than I probably should, because it's still work in progress, but watch this space, and I think I'm very keen to do more in the early years space.
So lots of people are also asking, when are we likely to see the SEND review, and whether or not you can give us a date for that, and how it will tie in with the school white paper and the social care review.
Yeah, so I can certainly give you a bit more clarity. So I can't give you a date because it's still all being worked up, but it's certainly going to be this month. The school white paper will come first. It's very, very much joined up. It will also be joined up with the review into children's social care, although the review into children's social care will come later. So that's the third, if you like. And in part, that's because although I'm working really closely with Josh McAllister, who's leading on the independent review, I'm also conscious that we have the national panel that is reporting on the tragic deaths of Arthur and Star, and I think Josh rightly concluded that he wanted to ensure that any findings as part of that national panel review was incorporated into his review too. So the sequencing will be school white paper, then the SEND review, which will both be this month, then followed by the independent review into children's social care, which is likely to be a little bit longer, but very much still on the horizon. And understandably, they will all talk to each other in numerous respects.
Given that there's been a strong focus on the rhetoric of multi-agency working since the reforms in 2014, how will the review tackle the issue that this has never really translated into practice? For example, health and social care input into EHCPs has been minimal.
So this will certainly be covered. I mean, what I think, fundamentally, if you look at some of the issues around the reforms in 2014, it was the implementation and the lack of multi-agency join up that was the problem. So I mean, I'll be very interested to hear your feedback when you see the green paper. And this is why I think, again, the consultation is so important, because it'll give us an opportunity to hear from you whether you think what we're proposing in relation to multi-agency working and join up is sufficiently robust, and that there are mechanisms to hold those third parties, like, for example, integrated care systems, to account for how they're supporting children with SEND locally.
There's a question around tribunals and whether or not the amount of money spent by local authorities has been investigated and those findings included within the SEND review.
So I don't know whether it's been investigated, but we're certainly alive to both the cost of tribunals, the results of tribunals, but also I'm really alive to the fact that it's a hugely stressful experience for parents too. And I don't think parents should have to fight the system. So I want to ensure really that nationally, any parent, wherever they are in the country, have a real clear idea about what they should expect, what they're entitled to via their local authority at a local level, so that there shouldn't be the need. I mean, there will always, of course, be parents that will go to tribunal, but I want to make it so far fewer parents feel that they need to take a case to tribunal, because they're getting the support that their child rightly deserves at a far earlier stage, and they're being supported by the local authority because they know exactly what their entitlement is, regardless of where they live in the country.
Given there are nationally there are shortages of therapy services and educational psychologists, what plans will be put in place to provide the support for children who have been assessed as having this as a need?
So this is something I mean, as much as I wish it were so, not something within my control, but it's something that I regularly raise with my counterpart at the Department for Health and Social Care, and I will continue doing so, Renata.
Once families have gone through the educational plan process, local provision is often lacking. Will there be information within the SEND review around how local provision is going to be improved across the nation?
Yes, there certainly will. That's my plan.
Here's a question about the social care review, and how does the SEND review work with the social care review? As the reality on the ground is that social care is set up for safeguarding and not for the needs of disabled children, and parent blaming is institutionalized. So
I mean, I'd probably need a little bit more information as to where the question's coming from in terms of answering it. I mean, what I do know is the direction of travel of the review into children's social care, and obviously I've met with Josh. I've been out visiting children's homes, and I've met with Josh a number of times, but it is an independent review, and I haven't yet seen a copy or draft copy of Josh's review. So I probably need to know a little bit more in terms of the premise of the question in order to answer it in terms of the direction of travel of the...
It's I think it's around social care being used to gatekeep education services and support, and the fact that social care assessments are just not given. You just get a not known to service as part of the Ehcp assessment.
Okay. The honest answer is I don't know. So I will take that away and and I will look into it further.
One of the questions was around co-productions with families and forums, and will that still be the case within the new SEND review?
Yes, it certainly will, Sarah.
This question is about attendance targets and the fact that they're based on cold data and do not take into account the needs of an individual, and whether or not anything's going to be done to change that so they accurately reflect what's going on. We're
doing a lot of work on exclusions and behaviour. So we're working up policy in that regard at the moment, separate to the SEND review. But your specific point is on attendance, and I know that we have covered that in the review. I just don't want to mislead by going to it before I've read that draft section again.
There's lots of questions around the local authority creating culture change around SEND and transparency when they're making decisions.
Yeah, it's both fair points, and this will definitely be covered in the review. I mean, part of this, I come back to the point about at the moment, too many parents feel that they need to fight the system because the local authority is not giving them the support, or their school or multi-academy trust is not giving them the support, and then they're not having the backup of the local authority when it comes to the EHCP process. But I think in part that's driven by not having a national system or a clear idea for parents on exactly what they should be able to expect, regardless of where they live in the country. So I think having far more clarity around what anybody, regardless of where they live in the country, should be able to expect based on the needs of their the child as an individual, I think is really important then in terms of ensuring that they can hold the local authority to account. And then through the SEND review will set out the mechanisms by which local authorities and other actors within the system can be held to account to.
This question is about home to school transport. It says, does the Minister understand that home to school transport is absolutely essential for SEND children? Does he accept that buying cheap transport often leads to broken routes and SEND children don't access school and parents and carers can't access their workplace?
Yes, I'm certainly alive to that, and ultimately, we want every child to achieve their potential. You do that by ensuring that the child is happy and well supported, and I think what we've got to ensure that is that where homeschool transport is provided, that it's suitable and it supports the well-being of the child, because that's the way they're most likely to feel supported, and they'll achieve better outcomes as part of their education. However, having said all that, I come back to the broader point that actually if more schools were more inclusive and parents had confidence that their child would get the support that they needed within their local school, then fewer parents would be relying on home to school transport, and where they were relying on it, it would be a shorter journey to a local school, as opposed to some of the cases we hear of an hour each way, which may not be the best thing for that individual child. And I suppose the other thing to add, Renata, to that is that as part of the 2.6 billion that we're investing in as part of the spending review period over the next 3 years on new places, it's ensuring also that there is specialist provision closer to those who currently need it. So I'm conscious that far too many people are travelling too far at the moment for the provision that their child needs.
There's been several questions around funding and whether that's going to be, the SEND funding is going to be ring-fenced, and whether there'll be a single format for creating plans in the future.
I mean, it's a question that sometimes come up around should SEND funding be ring-fenced and not be allowed for other things. I think our objective has always been to equip providers wherever they're located in the country with the resources that they need to provide high quality support for children and young people with SEND in their setting. And the ambition in terms of the Green Paper is to set out both short and long-term ambitions on SEND funding, and that will include far greater clarity on how SEND funding should be used by local authorities, and we'll also be consulting as part of that on options for determining notional SEND budgets for schools. So, for example, what schools should be able to afford on in terms of SEN support.
This will be the last question from me, and then there'll be one more question from Sarah following this. We're just wondering why there is a lack of research around the older aged young people who have educational healthcare plans, who have completed college or who have gone to university and obviously not had their educational healthcare plans follow them to university, and whether there are any plans to actually look at what happened to them afterwards, in terms of them accessing work, being able to complete college or being able to complete university.
It's a really good question, and any research would have been before my time, so I'm not aware of any specific research. But this is an area that I feel really passionately about, Renata, because for two reasons. One, because I've spent time meeting with young people with SEND and their parents and carers, who talk about their aspirations and their hopes and their dreams and what they want to do in the future, and making sure they want to be doing something meaningful. They want to be working, and I think we need to be far more joined up across governments to make sure that happens. And I spent 2.5 years before doing this role at the Department for Work and Pensions, so I know what can be achieved if there's the will to do so. And then I also know that we need to do far more around employers too, and changing their culture around being inclusive employers. And being inclusive means hiring more young people, yes, with disabilities, but also with special educational needs too. And I think too many don't necessarily take that dual approach. So there's a lot more that I want to do in this area, and if there is research that we could and should be undertaking, I'm happy to take that away and explore it.
The last question from me: how do you think that the SEND review will change that that fight for families and make it into a much smoother system?
So I think I'll need you to read it, and you won't have to wait very long. But I think that the theme throughout is trying to take away the confrontation in the system. I'm trying to work out how to put this diplomatically. I've met so many parents who have been the most amazing advocates and fighters for their children's rights. And that's brilliant, and I applaud every single one. I've got 2 young girls, and I would, if necessary, fight for them too. But I'm more worried about the children that don't have parents that are in that position and aren't able to fight. And as a result, I want a system where nobody has to fight. And I could run through some of the themes in terms of what we're proposing. Although I think you'll see when you read the review that throughout it's really designed to try and remove the confrontation from the system, and at its very heart, in my view at least, the way you do that is having far more clarity around what everyone, regardless of where they live in the country, should be entitled to, and then having a clear and robust mechanism for accountability and redress.
Thanks, Minister, for answering those questions. We've just come to an end to the Q&A session now, and I just want to thank you, everybody who's put a question in the Q&A box. We've had over 260 questions in this very short space of time, and I'm really sorry that we didn't get round to answering as many as we would have liked. But I would like to say a big thank you to Will Quince for answering the questions that we put to him today, and his team for facilitating this. A massive thanks to you, parents, who've taken up your, taken an hour out of your day, often over child pickup, which we know. But thank you for taking the time out today to join us on this webinar, and thank you to Special Needs Jungle as well for facilitating this event. Thank you, Tanya.
Tina, may I come in just one more time, if possible?
Of course.
Just to say, if you're able to do so, because I'm conscious that 200 is amazing, it's incredible. If there is a way in which you can copy and paste those and get them to us, I will go through them and put them into themes. And then if you're happy, I'll produce a document where I'll try my best to answer as many of those as possible. And then if you'd be so kind as to share those, because I wouldn't want people to go away thinking they didn't have their question answered. So if you're happy,
that's fine. We were going to do that anyway. So you've preempted what Tanya's going to say.
Yeah.
Thank you for that,
well, I've actually copied all the questions that as we were going and pasted them into a document already. But if you didn't get a chance to make a comment, we've also got a dedicated form. It's https://bit.ly/ and in capitals SEND, and then in lowercase message. So send message. So bit.ly/send message. And you should also have that on your invite, hopefully. So we're going to leave that open for another week to give you a chance to put your comments in there, and then we'll download those, clean them up and send them off to the Minister as well. But thank you again, Minister, for joining us. I think it's been a really good session. Obviously, you can't blurt out everything that's in the SEND review, but we do hope that we can have another one of these when the SEND review is out. That will be fantastic.
I'm very happy to get to that, Tanya. Yeah, very happy to do that.
Thank you. Tina.
Yeah, there will be more chances, of course, to participate over the next coming months. There will be a consultation on the Green Paper when it's finally released. And also watch out for everybody's social media and sign up to newsletters to keep in touch. All the organisations on this call do those anyway, and Special Needs Jungle do them regularly as well. So the recording will be out shortly. It will be on YouTube, and where possible, we will be able to share it. So please watch out for that too. Thank you so much for your time today and for participating. It's been great hour session. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you, everybody. Thanks. Bye-bye.